Hi and welcome to the Trainz tutorial on bogeys. We're going to get these 3D models exported as FBX with our animations, and then we're going to put them in a Trainz asset and install them into the latest Tane SP2. So to get started, we'll type in Trainz and bogey. We're looking for the kind bogey on the wiki, which explains what we need. These are all the components explained in text form, and we're going to do this in a video, so the video will post at the top of this wiki page so that others can find it, and we'll get on with explaining all this in the video, hopefully. So we move back to not Trainz, we'll move to our 3D software, 3ds Max, and we will import the meshes that we've got. And I've got 3 meshes. One's LOD 0, which is, if we go to viewport, stats, and we'll just apply for the selected, it shows us that we've got 7,000 polys on this particular model, which is LOD 0, a little bit high, but for this example it'll do. LOD 1 is just under 2,000 polys, and LOD 2 is just over 500 polys, so that should be a lot less, around about 50 polys for the lowest LOD, or less, just because it's more or less a square, and when you're looking at it from that distance you can't really tell much at all, so you really want it to be more or less 12 polys or so. But that would mean we would need another LOD, and for this example we're not going to add it. But I recommend that you do for all your assets. So we move on. We will animate this particular asset using dummies, and we will, for this example, we'll just put the meshes underneath the dummies. We won't use the skin modifier, but in another example we'll go through and we'll actually add the skin modifier, so you can see how that's done as well if you want to do it that way. But for such a simple animation, I don't think that complexity is needed, but you might want to use it, so we'll demo that as well. So what we want to do is we want to break this up into 3 parts. We want to have our wheels, or one wheel, and another wheel over here, but first we will detach this wheel. Where are we? Detach. We'll call this one bogey wheel 0, and we will also get the next wheel and detach that one. Bogey wheel 1. It's probably a good idea to know where it came from as well, so get your naming conventions right so you don't lose track of what's what. Okay. I need that, might just smooth that out. It's looking a bit rough. There we go. Smooth this one as well. That's better. Okay. So now we have these 3 separate objects. It's object 1, which is the body, and then we've got a wheel and another wheel. We want to add a dummy so we can animate these now. And we go ahead to add helpers, dummy, we drop that in and call it b.r. because Trainz identifies b.r. as being a bone, and then you can call it whatever you want after that. I'm going to call this main because it's going to be our main bone that everything's attached to, and that one's going to sit, well, I'm going to put it at 0, 0, 0 for now, but it's not actually going to. Well, it should actually sit there, to be honest. That's where our bone's going to be, at 0, 0, 0. For now. It may change. come to think of it. So you can see that my well, you can probably see it better here. The correct way to model a bogey is to have the axis in line at Z0. So that black line is Z0, as you can see here. Z's there, Z0. As we start moving this up, you can see it go up and down. So we want these axes to be actually pushed up, and what I'm going to do for that is I'll zoom in on these and adjust this height to be somewhat around 0. So that looks correct. Whether it's 100% accurate or not is another thing. So we'll jump in here and we'll change our pivots for each of the wheels to be the center of the object. And funnily enough, Z is actually at 0. So I don't really need to change it, but you could change it then if you needed to. Also changing the body with the wheel so that everything's still aligned and looks correct. I'll change the pivot of this wheel. That's at 0, and this will be a little bit off. That's pretty good there. Our pivot remains at 0. That is correct. And then we go and clone b.r. wheel 0. And we also want b.r. wheel 1. Now, where we want these positioned is not where they are. We need the 0 over on the 0 wheel and the dummy 1 over on wheel 1. So in order for us to do this, we select our wheel 0. We go up to align and we click on the object we want it to align with. And we say align with the Y and Z and X, I guess, but it's going to be much similar because it's right in the center to begin with. Again, we select wheel 1, we go up to align, we click on this, and again we can click all these if we feel like it, but whatever gets us into the middle is where we want to be. And that's now positioned exactly where we need it to be, so that when we do rotate, that this object is going to rotate correctly and won't be offset from the dummy node itself. We do also need a few other things before we get started. I might just save that to begin with. Got an example I'm going to save over. And we do need to put materials on it as well. So we might prepare our asset and come back to our 3D software in a second. So this is the tutorial one I'm going to use. In here we have config, and the config says that's my code. The kind is Bogey. The username is whatever you want to call it. Whatever the bogey actually is would be a good start. And then in the username also, you want to put the diameter of your wheels. Now you also need to use the diameter down here under animate dist or animate dist, I guess. Sure, let's go with that. And what you'll be doing is people will use this distance or the diameter of your wheel to determine where the attachment points for their vehicle will go for the bogeys. Okay, so it's a good thing that you actually include this in the username of your bogey. And how we get this is another thing as well. I'll tell you in a second. If we go down to here, anim dist is the distance traveled in meters by the bogeys in 1 second, 30 frames of animation. In other words, multiply the wheel diameter by pi. Okay, so we know that we can get our radius. A radius is half the circle, diameter is the full circle. So in order to get our half circle, what we can do is we can, that's 90 degrees there. You can see that's nice and straight. So if we snap this on, we start a rotation till we get to 90, there we go. And then we can take the top of this, what is it? The top of this vertice. So let's say this one, collapse this because we're happy with doing that. And this one here is going to say exactly that the top of our circle, as you can see there, or our wheel, sorry. And it's 0.422 from the Z0, which is right here. So from that point there up to that point there is 0.422 meters. So that's our radius. I'll just bring up a little image that might help as well. This one here, this is the official method for finding, for setting up the attachment points. We want to put the attachment points in the center, all at 0, Z, so that our wheels are on each side of the 0. They're centered to 0, Z. A lot of the community often do it this way, so that the base of the wheels is at 0, and this is actually not the official way to do it. So if you want to make sure you line up your attachment points on your bogies like this, it's the correct way to do it. So we go back to our bogey, and we've measured that now. Our radius is 0.422. Copy that, get my trusty calculator out, times it by 2 to get the diameter, and I will adjust what I had in here, so that's actually correct. And then to get the animate, I hope was it saying that, animate, we go multiply the wheel diameter by pi, so we get into here, that's our wheel diameter, remember, that's our radius, times it by 2 gets our diameter, then we times it by pi, and that gives us our tag for config file. I'm not going to say it again, I've said it enough I think. And I didn't copy and paste it, so let's do that one more time. For some reason the copy and paste didn't come across. Times by pi, and that's what we want there. Now it's happy. Okay, so that gets us that tag. We've added the diameter in our username so people can actually see what it is when they want to use our bogies on their vehicles. They can set their attachment points correct so the bogies will line up to the rails. Put a description in. Category class, again, we have been demoing this, but just go into Trainz, category class. And then type in bogey or truck, there you go. ZB, that's what your category class needs to be, ZB. Author, email, set them up. It's for Trainz build 4.5 because it's TAIN SB2. And the license, if you want to fill these things in, you probably should. Direct drive is another one that you want to have a look at depending on what you're using your bogies for. If the bogey animation is linked to the steam piston and physics system, it's more for the steam engines, so we are going to have it as 0 because we have not got that linked up at all. Another thing that we're going to do here is we're going to use an LM file. In another tutorial we'll show you how to set it up using LODs within the config.txt file itself, because I'm pretty sure it's not essential that we have a LM file, especially for this simplistic bogey, but for now we're just going to use the .lm file and go from there. And then we've got our thumbnail and keyword listing or keyword table, which we don't have any need for any keywords in there at this time. Right, that's the config. We do have two files. One is a diffuse or albedo, I guess, with the new system coming up for Trainz. That's what we'll call them. And then our albedo has a alpha mask, which the lowest LOD will use because it doesn't actually cut the polys out for this particular part on the side. And you can see there, if we load up our lowest LOD, you can see that it's actually a solid geometry. So we're gonna use a transparency on that. Another note that we're not doing in this tutorial, but you should want to think about, is maybe making this a separate texture so that it's using transparency and nothing else is, depending on how big and how big your texture is really. But that's something else you can think about. So it uses a different shader. It's just for performance reasons, but for now we're going to stuff it all in the one texture. And then the normal map, that one has a specular map, but the normal map looks like this, and then the alpha has a specular map that looks like this. And that's it. There's our two textures. We'll set them up now in our materials. We're going to call it body.m. and the material we're going to use, duck back into Trainz materials, and we're going to use one of the legacy ones because these new PBR materials are for the next Trainz product, 4.6. So we're still doing 4.5 here, and we're going to use a T-bump text. You can use whatever material suits you for the visual effect you need. T-bump text is here, and it tells you how to use it. I know how to use it, but if you don't, feel free to read on. So we're going to call it T-bump text. We're going to add our diffuse, or in this case our albedo, that's what it's called. And then we also make sure that the image alpha is applied to that, and we drop in our bump, our normal bump, and then we add the normal bump texture to it, which is just here. And again, it should have an alpha channel. It does. So that's it. That's our texture. You also want to enable it so you can see it in the viewer, which is up here. And I'll just bring it across here and turn on all our meshes and just drag that onto them all and assign it. So that's now assigned. We've got the materials assigned. We can turn our lowest LODs off. Save that. Okay, that brings me to the materials are set up. We've cut our we've sectioned our meshes off. We've set up our dummies. Must be time to animate our dummies. So what we'll do is we'll pop these in a hierarchy. Main, wheel 1. So the main's holding everything, then the body comes into play with the wheel attachment points, then each wheel sits under their own attachment point. Okay, bring that up a little larger. So from here, what we're going to do to animate each one of these is we will go to the motions or motion tab, parameters, and under rotation, x-axis, along that axis, we will apply a float expression. And what do we want in here? Actually, sorry, before we do that, let's just change our timeline to be 30 or 29, so that 0 to 29 has 30 frames, because on the website, as you can see under here, it says the distance travelled in meters by the bogey in 1 second over 30 frames of animation. So we save that, and then we go back to frame 1, Go back to motion, make sure we've got one of our bones, wheel 0 selected for this instance. Rotation X, float expression. We add 360 times sine, bracket, capital N, capital T, close bracket. And what you'll find over the course of 30 frames, it's not doing exactly what I would have thought. We're not getting a full 360 rotation there. Let's see why. Something's gone a bit pear-shaped. Okay. You know what it was? It's because I applied that when I had more than 29 frames. So if we grab this, let's just set it back to Bezier float, and it should be back to normal. Yep. Then we apply a float expression with that expression. Now it's better. There we go. Okay, so we'll see that that rotates nicely. We'll just make sure we're not getting any skips. Nope, looks pretty clean. And we'll do the same for our wheel 1. Rotation around X. And we edit this to be a float expression. Add 360 times sine, open bracket, capital N, capital T, close bracket. And be on frame 0, and you'll find that that's a full rotation. They're both rotating in the right direction, and that then becomes our animation, and that's going to play over and over again when we need it. Well, I guess at the speed that our train is going. So we're happy with that. Let's save it again. We select what we need to export as LOD 0. We then go File, Export. Now there's Export, which will export all this, including the things that are invisible. Or we go Export, Export Selected. And then make sure we're under the right section. And we export it as Bogey _ LOD 0, because that's what I've called it in my config. Save that. We want all these off, animation, ticked, and Z up, and it's a binary for an FBX file. The plugin has detected one or more animation controls that cannot be directly supported using the baked animation. Well, that's no good. Why not? What have we got? That should make a difference. I think it's lying to us, so let's go ahead and see if that actually worked. And under here we didn't explain that bogey.lm.txt has been created, and it actually has reference to these 3 LODs. These 2 have been copied from another file, but we will export them later. But let's just get the thing into Trainz to take a look at it first. This is the one we exported to make sure that you understand or know that I'm saying the right thing. 356 was just exported, 357, so that's the brand new one we just exported. If we open this up, we have 100% of the screen when the file is taking up LOD 0 is set first, and then once that LOD is taking up 65% of the screen, it will use, or less, sorry, it will use LOD 1, and when that LOD is taking up 30% of the screen space or less, it will use LOD 2. Okay, so that's how that works. Attachment cutoff will cut off when it's 4% of the screen. The render cutoff, so it'll stop rendering this bogey at 1% of the screen when it's 1% of the screen. And animation cutoff will stop animating when it's 4% of the screen. So this is just a performance thing that will help. Okay, so now we've got our files in there. I've manually made these. I like to do that, but I'm sure once you import your textures, Trainz will do that for you. Again, I've put the alpha in there as well for the albedo texture we've got. And that's it. that's all we really need. Let's drop that into Trainz. I've already got a vehicle that's looking for that particular asset. We haven't installed it yet, so let's install it now. And there's a couple little warnings we'll ignore for now. It's an FBX thing, and there it is. So that's happy now. This has been installed, and what you'll find when you load this up is the animation won't have started, so your mesh is going to look all wrong, which is fine in the preview asset, because bogeys, the animation for bogeys, it doesn't get loaded when preview asset is shown. So you won't really be able to tell whether your file looks correct in preview asset, whether your asset looks correct in preview asset for your bogeys. But what you can do, see, it looks wrong, doesn't look like it's set up correctly, but it is. Well, what you can do, you can load up your vehicle in here, and now I know it'll look wrong again, I'm about to explain that. You can load your vehicle up in here and it'll stick to the attachment points that you've told it to. Why this is looking wrong is because we haven't actually set up our animation file, our .kin file. What you can do is you need to open up your bogey, and under here you'll have a bogey underscore 0 underscore take space 001, or whatever you've called it, underscore take 001 is what you'll get. You want to change this to anim.kin, okay? Because if we go back to the wiki, you'll find that bogey animation files exported from 3D editor must be called anim.kin and included in the asset folder. So this is just for bogeys. It has to be called this name, otherwise it won't know where your animation file is. So now that we've got that named, we can go ahead and submit our change. And again, it's still not going to show up in the preview asset for this. It'll still look wrong, but it should, I think, work here. Yes, there you go. So it's now said I'll start the animation. So it's set up the animation for your bogeys, and they're now there on the vehicle. Again, to prove me hopefully right, it's not set up on the individual bogey itself, so it's going to look a bit wrong. But on there, it'll be fine. And to prove that it animates, we'll jump into a session I've created. Now, it's not going to sit flush on the rails because this vehicle in particular has a different attachment point, and it wasn't set up. Its other bogeys were not set up the correct way. So we're seeing a big gap there because the vehicle attachment point has been set up higher than it probably should have been. Also, that's not entirely true because the bogeys are going to be different as well. So the wheel diameter and how high the bogeys were meant to sit will be different. So that's not to say this is incorrectly set up. It's just if we want to use these bogeys, we have to change the attachment points on that particular vehicle. And we're up nice and close, so it's going to be using LOD 0. You'll see as we start animating, our animation starts playing. So that's how you get your bogeys in and animating into Trainz using that method. The next video which we'll do is we'll probably take LOD 1 and we'll add a skin to that so we can animate it using skin. And then if there's any other things that we need to do, we'll do it with LOD 0. But by that stage, with LOD 0, we'll have our animation gone because you don't really want animation playing when you're all the way back here. So I hope that's going to help some people out with their LODs, their bogeys, with their animation and LODs and getting it attached to their vehicles. If you have any more questions, definitely jump over to the forums or on this video and we'll try and answer them. Thanks for watching.